suggest what he means. And it's up to you to decide whether or not you think it makes sense. The style of which you could say, is that Picasso? Is that Braque? It's very much Cubism. Now, the thing about Magritte he was born in Châtelet, a small town outside of Brussels. When he was 16, he moved to Brussels, and for the next 5 years, he studied in the Art Institute in Brussels. So please come forward so we do not block the entranceway. So when he went to the art school in Brussels, for 5 years, what he did was he studied the classical masters. Not very flattering, is it? You know, why would you paint yourself in a not flattering light? Magritte is based this painting on a character of Fantômas. It's kind of like the Pink Panther. Have you seen the Pink Panther? This was the Belgian version. So the detective was always trying to catch this Fantômas, and despite all the evil things he did, Fantômas always escaped. And I think that was what Magritte was trying to portray himself as. He looked upon Fantômas as an icon. He did not have those wine, women, and song, which we know all artists of that time kind of like lived their lives accordingly. He was faithful to her. She was by his side, and his strength, his tower of strength, right to the very end when he died in 1967. So she was always with him. And I think a lot of his success is due to her. First thing you'll notice are these curtains. Now, why curtains? Magritte loved going to the cinema. He would go to this particular cinema, Cinema Bleu in Brussels, mainly because his brother was the ticket seller. So we're not sure when he was dating Georgette. It says in his autobiography that he would spend every weekend at the cinema, but he got it free, or he actually paid for them, so we don't know. But curtains are a major feature of his art. Because why? Curtains reveal behind it, the solid velvet dark red curtains, they reveal the fantasy world of the movies behind it. And in a lot of paintings, he always has these curtains, because then it's a bit of a dramatic response, I guess, that he wants you to understand that he's trying to reveal fantasy to you. And in particular, he was fascinated with the idea of metamorphosis. So what is metamorphosis in art? It's simply when an object changes shape, size, right in front of your eyes. In this case, you see what seems to be a typical suburban landscape, houses, roofs, but it's in the shapes, encased by the legs. And it then metamorphoses into a naked woman. And you ask yourself, what's going on? Why does he do this? A man dressed in an overcoat, Edwardian collar, a starched collar, with a black tie, with a bowler hat. He says this represents the everyday man. So the everyday man, uniform. This is what most, I guess, professional working middle class people in Belgium at that time looked like. So he's just portraying the everyday man. And then behind this everyday man is the back of another man. Is it a reflection? Is it the same man? You look closer and you realize maybe it's not quite a reflection, because they're not really in line. But what is he doing? He is facing a very bleak kind of like outlook. See, it looks dark. It doesn't look very friendly. Actually, if you came up close and looked at it, it really does look like a frame. He's painted it so well. The wood grains and everything looks so real. And on the right side, he's painted 4 silhouettes. And at the very bottom, he's painted a tear in the painting. So this is where he wants to ask, I guess he's trying to ask you, the relationship between reality and representation. How real does a painting need to be before it becomes reality? So he's painted this to show you that it's so real, isn't it? When you look at this tear, it really looks as if it's torn from the canvas. But you know, it's a painting. We know it's not real. At the same time, you see these four objects here, and they're silhouettes. Why did he paint silhouettes? Why the pipe, the key, the cup, and the leaf? Contrast that with this painting. What is this? And this is what he says the surrealists are doing. Where if you let your subconscious freely flow, you come up with something like this. But you can't tell what it is. It's so abstract. What is it? Is it plumes of smoke? You cannot recognize anything in there. And so that is what he says. It's the difference between where the surrealists are heading and where he is heading. He is painting items that suggest to you to think about what it represents. Very normal painting of a couple becomes very different. Why? Because he's covered their faces. So why would he do that? What does this mean? What is the significance of it? I mean, there are actually two versions of this painting. One is this, where they're both standing very close to each other, but they're not physically touching and they're looking out at you. And there's another one where they're facing each other, almost about to kiss, but not quite. So does this painting make you feel uncomfortable? It makes you feel a little strange, doesn't it? What on earth is going on? So the eye is represented, as I said, larger than life. It takes up the entire canvas. But reflected in the eyeball are the clouds. And it's so realistic. And the iris right in the center is dead black. It's like a dead black hole. And you contrast that with what he's done to the tear duct. That's so realistic. When you look at the tear duct, you almost feel the tear forming and the tear about to drop. And then you contrast that with this black hole. So what are you supposed to look at? How are you supposed to look? Now, this painting currently hangs at MoMA in New York. Prior to being hung in MoMA, it was owned by a photographer called Man Ray, a very, very famous photographer. Man Ray hung it in his living room above his mantelpiece. And Man Ray made a statement saying, "This is the only painting I know where the painting sees more than what the audience sees." So let that sink in a little bit and try to understand what Man Ray said. Okay, this is his wife, Marguerite. He's painted her larger than life. Do you think he intentionally painted her in separate pieces, or he painted her as one big canvas and then cut her up? So you think it was intentional that he actually painted separately all these pieces? Wrong. He actually painted her full life, and then he cut the canvas up. And then he says, "I put it here because I want you using your eyes to fill in the blanks." And automatically we do. And this is him saying to you, this is an exercise in how your mind predetermines things. Can we see that it's actually a painting within a painting? But the painting within the painting seems to portray the reality behind the painting. Is that right? He's titled this The Human Condition. What if it wasn't? How do you know that this tree in this painting really is in the painting? No, not in the painting. How do you know that this tree in this painting, that there's really a tree behind it? You don't know, do you? You assume, because he's laid it out so perfectly that you automatically think that there must be that tree in the real scene outside that window. What if you were wrong? Was quite an intense person. When he got involved in things, he kind of like got lost within himself. And so he's painted himself in this manner, just making fun of himself, because he always smokes a pipe. And when he's in concentration and when he's thinking about his art and thinking about the meaning of his art, he gets so lost that, he becomes part of his pipe. So you see him drawing his nose being part of that pipe. So this was just really something that he was poking fun at himself on. And with the lamp, the light, it's like the aha moment of discovering something. At the end of World War II, for money reasons, he and another artist decided to do forgeries. They decided to copy the classical painters and sell them. But Magritte took one step further. He said, I can't really copy exactly the paintings, but what I'll do is I'll cheat. And so in this particular painting, he's taken the two paintings and combined them so that if you look at the two paintings at Uffizi and Louvre, one has the dress, one has the hair, and they combined it. And people said, wow, Magritte, what are you doing? Why are you doing this illegal thing? And this is Magritte's reasoning. So think about it and see whether you agree. He says, look, if someone buys a diamond and pays a real price for the diamond, even though the diamond is fake, to that person, because he paid the real price, it's real. What is interesting about this painting is that it is a piece of living history. Let me explain why. One of Magritte's greatest fans in the US was a man called Paul McCartney. And we all know Paul McCartney's from the Beatles. And Paul McCartney bought this painting. And when it came time for the Beatles to name their record label, what do you think they named it? Apple Records. Absolutely right. Now, fast forward that 30 years, 40 years, Steve Jobs comes along. Great Beatles fan. What do we all have in our pocket today? An Apple, absolutely right. So, all those wonderful ideas, this is the origin of how Apple came about. How many of you do this and imagine when you see a person, imagine them naked? Yes? It happens, right? Those of you are shaking no, I think you're lying. So Magritte has just put it out there by painting her dressed and her naked and saying, you know what? We all do this, but none of us dare to admit it. Magritte painted this for the Venice Biennale. And when he painted it, response was amazing. People loved it. So much so that the organizers sold it 3 times. So he had to paint 2 more paintings of the same painting because they had committed to 3 buyers. And the original painting actually went to Peggy Guggenheim. And the original painting is still at the Guggenheim Museum in Venice. So if you ever go to Venice and you go to the Guggenheim Museum, look out for this painting because it's hanging there. Now, have a look at this painting. What is happening? Is it dusk? Is it dawn? Look closer. The sky is way too bright for it to be either dusk or dawn. It's probably midday. It's just so vibrant, it's so bright. And then look at the bottom. That's definitely not dusk or dawn either. It's too black, it's the dead of the night. And you ask yourself, because of the way the shadows are, you ask yourself, what is going on? And it's basically Magritte trying to pull a fast one on you. He's taken 2 paintings and joined them together. One middle of the day, middle of the night. And he put them together just to try and get you to think out of the box. Now what's amazing about this painting is, he did 3, right, at the Venice Biennale. For the next 5 years, he continues to paint different versions of this. He ends up painting 27 versions of the Dominion of the Light. This is one of them. And wait for it, November 2024, last year, 2 months ago, one of the versions was sold at a Christie's auction for, guess, $121.8 million US. You're seeing right in front of you. So this painting probably costs as much. So before the curators start to build a fence around it, I suggest after the tour, come back and take a close look at this, because you're looking at $121.8 million worth of painting. Nickname for this painting? It's a song.
It's Raining Men.
Yes, that's right. So whenever everyone says it's Raining Men painting, we all refer to this. Now, the title of this painting is called Golconda. Excuse me. Why Golconda? Golconda is a city in India. It's a city in India where historically all these wonderful Indian gems, jewelry, the crown jewels and all that were manufactured in Golconda. And so Golconda has always had an image of riches, and people all think about Golconda as a city where the streets are lined with gold. And although Magritte had never been to Golconda, he imagined that how wonderful that city would be. And in his own terms, with his fascination of the sky, of being in the air, of dreaming up there, he says, wouldn't it be just as fascinating if men could fly? And so, in this painting, a typical suburban scenario shows all these men that are up in the sky. You don't know though whether they are going up or they're coming down. And I think that's really up to you to decide whether it's coming up or coming down behind this painting. Now, Magritte, when he was traveling to the US pretty often, always wanted to travel with his two dogs. But the airlines refused. They all said, no, you can't bring an animal on the plane. And he says, oh, let me talk to the CEO of the Belgian Airlines. The Belgian Airlines at that time was called Sabena Air. Now, talk to the CEO and said, look, I'll give you a painting if you let me bring my dogs on board every time I travel. And so the CEO said, okay, fine. So he gave this painting to Sabena Airlines. And Sabena Airlines actually used this as their logo for the airline. So I don't know whether any of you remember Sabena before it went bankrupt in 1990s. This was the logo of a format of this. And eventually when Sabena Airlines went bankrupt, Sabena Airlines sold this painting for 4.3 million euros to settle its debts. So what does Bauchi's landscape mean? So it comes from Greek mythology. The story goes like this. Zeus and Hermes came down to earth disguised as paupers, poor people, and they went to this rich city begging for food. So they went from house to house asking for shelter and for food and water, but nobody wanted anything to do with them. They looked at them, smelly, dirty, go away. Nobody. They went through the entire town, rich town, nobody helped. They left the town. On the way out, in this ramshackle shed, lived this couple, Bauchi and her husband. And they opened up their house to them, their shed, provided them with water, bread, and fed them. And then the gods revealed who they were. And they said, look, come with us to the top of the mountain. So he took Bauchi and her husband up to the top of the mountain, and Zeus sent a humongous flood that wiped out the entire village. So everything was destroyed. And he asked Bauchi and her husband to look at the devastation and said, this is what happens when you're corrupt. All of Magritte's paintings have a certain message. Now, when you exit this exhibition, on the reverse of this wall is the famous pipe that he painted. But this was painted much later in 1954. And he painted that, and at the bottom in French, he titled, "This is still not a pipe." So I suggest you go through the exhibition again, have a look at it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.